Hello friends and welcome to Sarat Chandra IAS Academy where your dreams are our mission. This is Yatharth here. Today we are going to read about various different things. So let's begin with the first thing, that is the global south. So let's learn what it is and what can we see for the UPSC here. So when we see the global dynamics, let's say, there has been a discernible impartiality between the two spheres. Just a second. All right. So the north and the south. Now the reasons are various. That what were the reasons to begin with? This is a whole different thing. We will study about the causes here, as well as the effect. So when we don't deal with this part, let's say, when I divide the reasons into two parts, the causation and the effect. So we don't deal with the causation here in this lecture, we'll be dealing with the effects. Alright. Still, causation can be understood as, just a second. Primarily the geographic location. And because of the geographic location of the south and the north globally, there have been differences in the development of economy, culture, that has led to a differentiated history. And now the disparity in the present scenario can be easily seen and be traced back to at least last 200 or 300 years. And even more, if wanted, you know, in the 1500s, the northern countries such as Spain, Portugal, they even divided the world in half and chose which one to rule. Alright, so this all has led to a disparity in the global north and global south. Now India belongs to this group and it is recognized as a developing country with vast potential. And the most important thing about India, why does it matter so much, is its geographical location. We are located at the center point of the world, near the most traffic-full oceans. We connect to the Middle East, to the Asia and Europe, and to the China and other mainland. Alright. This is why the position of India among its peers become very, very important. And now we need to see that how to change this advantage into India becoming a stronger country on all curtains, on all stages, whether they are economic, whether related to IR or any other global stage. Alright, so let's see, dealing with the history, economy and present. So changing dynamics of the global south. You can see here the countries such as USA, Canada, and even some part of Mexico can be counted in the more developed countries. You can see here the Greenland, here the Nordic countries, the Swiss countries, let's say European countries, Italy, and the countries over the Mediterranean Sea, even Turkey, the Russia and the China. Alright, these can be counted in the global north. While some countries, even let's say Australia, it's also a very developed country. Which mountain range did we read here in the last lecture? The Great Dividing Range. Alright, please remember this all. Whenever we are reading lectures, whenever we see a map, then all the features of the map should be clearly visible to us. Whether it is a lake here, whether it is a lake here, whether it is a mountain here. So you must be knowing which mountain is this. This is, let's say, Atlas Mountain here. Alright, this is Drakensberg Mountain here. These are the Andes. These are the Rockies. Here is the Appalachian Mountain Range. Alright, so all these things you need to remember whenever you see a map. These things are invisible. Alright, the map can be about anything, but you always need to see it geographically. Later on, we can move to the economic maps also, such as when the data changes with some economy related data. However, when we are talking about this line, this imaginary line, we must also remember its name. It's the Brent line. Alright, this can be asked that the Brent line divides which two groups? So it's the global north and the global south. Now, the division is based upon development. More developed and less developed countries. Now, is the development only economic? So it's not sheerly based on the economy. The development is both economic as well as human development. Alright, so we find India here on the border of this Brent line, and sharply in contrast with some nearby countries which may have even worse scenarios. Alright, such as we can see Pakistan here, Afghanistan, and some other Kazakhstan and Central Asian countries. So it's not a very strict line, but just gives us an idea. Alright, let's move forward. That why are we discussing this? Just a second. Alright. So in early 2023, the Prime Minister of India convened a virtual summit. Just a second. So the title of that virtual summit was Empowering the Global South. So this is India's one of the policy. That it is not only thinking about itself, we are not only thinking about ourselves, we are connecting to the global south, connecting to countries in and around us. One more thing you can see here from the map is that India is literally at the center point of all the important regions here. It relates with Africa, it relates with the South Asia. Alright, although as a convenient fact, the earth is a sphere and every point can be termed as a midpoint of somewhere. Alright, it will always be found on some radius. So what we need to know is that when we call India a midpoint, we need to show how. Not only geographically, but also in connection to its related countries. India could have been here also and still connect to Africa and South America. Alright, but this area is more important. Southeast Asia is more important. Alright, let's move forward. So historical context. Just a second. So it engaged, with around 125 nations. The summit's primary aim was to gather insight and feedback from global south countries, shaping the region's future priorities. So we need to see what are the future priorities of the global south. So when you are making the notes, let's say about the global south, you will just put a section, future priorities. Alright, and that future priorities you will write down this, and this, and then you can use it in answer writing. So let's see the historical context of where this global south came from, this word, this term. So global south highlights colonialism's historical legacy. So colonialism, let's say, we are not talking only about the British. Let's just go over the map once. So when we talk about the India, we see that British reigned over us for around 200 plus years. But at the same time, the British, they were ruling over parts of Africa, were engaged in slave trade. They were ruling in parts of the USA, popularizing it. They were ruling over parts of the Middle East, as well as Afghanistan and Pakistan. Then there were Spaniards and Portuguese who came to India as well, who ruled over the Southeast Asia as well, and also on South America. They even destroyed great civilizations here, such as the Mayans and the Incas. Incas especially. They also destroyed the Red Indians. Who were here, and also gave birth to many, such as the France. It ruled here in many parts of the Africa, and it still gave birth to many problems in these countries, such as the problems of drug trade, the problem of racism, the problem of the slave capital. Alright, so many problems were there, but it was more inclined that the North governed the South. The powers from North governed the southern countries. So this is one historical context that we need to talk about. So emphasize the challenge faced by the formerly colonized nations in achieving growth and development. So of course, when you are ruled by somebody else, they drain your wealth. And it becomes harder for these countries to keep pace with the northern countries. Alright. So such a organization of such 77 countries, it was founded in 1964 during the first UNCTAD session in Geneva, Switzerland. Become the largest intergovernmental organization of developing countries at that time. Alright, so G77 related to the developing countries in 1964. What was the purpose of G77? So it was created to promote economic interest and enhance negotiations. It comprises 134 countries as of now across the Asia, Africa, South America, and Caribbean and Oceania. Oceania is related to the Pacific Ocean and sort of Australian Oceans. Alright. The Caribbean, we all know, it's between the two Americas. So often referred to as G77 plus China, because China is not technically a part of the G77. A similar organization, which was named with UNOSSC. Please remember this organization when you make a separate topic, Global South. So I already told you that future priorities, then there are related organizations. So you put G77 here and UNOSSC here. I'll serve this PDF in the Telegram channel. Alright, so UN Office for South-South Cooperation. It was established in 1974. And it coordinates cooperation between Global South countries, developed nations and multilateral agencies in collaboration with the G77. Let us see that why the South faced so many challenges. So there was a certain decline in the interest in the Global South. In the early 21st century, there was a decline in interest and attention toward the Global South. Why? Because countries like India and Indonesia were perceived as moving away from their third world origins and seeking a more prominent global role as they reformed their economies. Alright, so the mentality of the North stayed the same. They don't want anybody to get economically better than they are or at even a similar level. So countries like India, after the economic reforms, privatization, 1991 reforms, so it was trying to come on the global stage. And that's why there was a decline in interest, so as to still keep the partiality and discernible difference. Recent resurgence. So we need to see that why now global south is being talking about. So the global south has regained importance in recent times, highlighting its significance in shaping the emerged global order. One more region is as the north breaks, it needs to choose where to stay. All right. So north is breaking between two parts. One is the Russia and China sort, and one is the USA and Europe sort. And now, in this struggle, India takes the light and sides with all of these countries via various different agreements and becomes stronger and gains power. The global south has regained importance. So what are the factors contributing to the revival? First was the COVID-19 pandemic. So we saw India's health system, how it helped everybody in the global stage. Except for that, COVID-19 had severe consequences on public health and economics in the global south. The crisis refocused attention on the vulnerabilities and needs of these nations. As well as India proved its strength. We controlled the pandemic in a good manner, did not have any significant losses, and also served many other countries with our vaccines. The economic downturn in the north, it resulted from the pandemic initially. The pandemic kick-started. There were many downturns earlier, such as 2008 recession. All right, but there was something to kick-start it. So this pandemic, all economic activities basically halted. There was nothing to be done. There was no need, no demand, no supply, except for the very basic things. All right. So the northern sphere, which relies mostly on its luxury items, let's say. All right. South is developing. South is more focused towards the delivery systems, the health systems, the basic systems. And they triumphed in this pandemic, highlighted the need for international cooperation and support. Repercussion of Russia-Ukraine conflict. One more thing, that the points that are written here are rather different from what I'm explaining. So the things that I'm explaining are additional. It's not an extension to these points. These points are severally important. So please read also these, such as COVID-19. They had consequences, and that's why the interest is there. So it's not very true. It's not, let's say, specifically true that just because there was COVID, there have been many diseases in the past in various subcontinents such as Africa. So there was never an interest in Africa of any other country. The most interesting part to any nation or any separate country for in a country is its economy. All right. So when we are answer writing, let's say when we are doing the answer writing, we must focus on the economic interests separately. That what are the economic interests of country A into country B? What are the economic needs of country A from country B? That is why they are having a relation. All right. North Korea is even also having relation with the China, let's say. So why it is having relation with China? Because it's a separate island. It needs China to supply it goods. All right. So there is always an economic dependence. So we must see that during the COVID-19 pandemic, what did India provide to everybody else? That's why they are dependent on us for some things. And that's why there is a revival in interest. All right. So Russia-Ukraine conflict. So as I told you that as the north breaks, it emerges into two different parts, which either want to go with India, let's say, or some other country, or want to keep their economic exchange okay. If this is not facilitated, they will try to come down. This we have already seen. So inaccuracy of the term, this is also a sub-heading of this global south that we need to see. That why is this global south rather incorrect? So it's criticized for inaccurately representing the countries that it was intended to describe. Some countries considered as a part of the global south like India are located in northern hemisphere, while others like Australia are in the southern hemisphere but often categorized as a part of the global north. So as we can already see, this definition is not completely geographical, and it does not hold true for the absolute geography. That is a very simple reason for inaccuracy of this term. So need for a more precise classification. In response to this inaccuracy, the Brand line was developed in 1980s. It more accurately divides the world into economic north. Alright, so this is the main thing here, the economy. On the south, based on factors like economic development and wealth distribution rather than solely by geographical location. But it still came out to be something similar to the global north and the global south. What are the demands of the global south? That means the future priorities of the global south. So proportionate voice at the global level. Alright, we are trying to seek our place in UN and bigger organizations. So with approximately 3/4 of the global population residing in these countries, they argue for a proportionate and meaningful voice in global decision-making process. Simply, we are talking about the UN and the veto process here. And in other bigger organizations such as WTO, alright, another bigger organization, equitable representation. So it's the same as the, let's say, proportionate. Alright, we have more population, our volume should be higher. So existing global governance model may not accurately reflect the world's demographic and economic realities, and there's a call for change to ensure the voice of the global south are heard and considered, aiming for a more balanced and inclusive global decision-making structure. What is the influence of global south in global politics? So prioritizing global south. So India's G20 presidency prioritized issue relevant to global south, showing an increased awareness of addressing the concern of developing countries. So India has shown itself as a harbinger or the leader of the global south, especially with its G20 presidency. Alright, we have an opportunity here to come out with various different agreements to make new relations and to showcase our face towards the head of the developing countries. Alright, so this has two factors. One is achieving this status in the south itself from various neighboring countries. So this becomes a theme that how India can emerge as a leader from its neighboring countries and how it can better its relations with them. Also, how as a leader of the global south, India can emerge as a valuable country towards the north, economically, of course. Alright, so India's G20 presidency, we have already seen this. Global south leadership. So developing countries like Indonesia, India, Brazil and South Africa. So these nations represent significant portions of the world's population and economics. The India, Indonesia, Brazil, BRICS countries basically. Alright, so focus on these organizations also. Whenever we are talking about a bigger group, let's say BRICS, Global South, etc., we should always take care that we represent or try to represent India as its head. Alright, or try to find out ways how India can progress. Even in your interview or in your answer writing, when you are writing GS3 answers, always try to show how India can progress. Alright. So inclusivity initiatives like Voice of the Global South Summit demonstrate a commitment to inclusivity and consultation with the wide range of Global South nations. The shift reflects a move away from traditional power structures dominated by the Western countries. So what were the traditional power structures? They were the West and the East, let's say. The West and the East. East is basically Russia and China. And West is basically USA. So this developed between the Cold War after 1945 to 1990s. Alright, now it's also the global north and global south. And from the global south emerged the India. We'll make a mind map out of this. So what to do, how to deal with this in the end. Multilateralism is there. So emphasis on global south priorities and their involvement shaping the G20 agenda reflects a commitment to multilateralism where decisions are collectively made by a diverse group of nations. Recently, India and Canada have not been on very good terms because of some issues. We'll cover a lecture on that also. Okay, one thing is rising influence of developing world. So participation in organizations like G20, BRICS, SCO, CUET Summit. CUET is especially very important. See, there are two types of organizations. One that are relevant one that are losing their relevance. All right, such as let's say BRICS, BIMSTEC. Relevant are let's say Asian. All right, there are various different organizations. So those which are losing their relevance, every year there will be a summit. When the summit is around, in the newspaper there will be two types of articles, that what happened in the summit, and one type of articles will come that this organization is still relevant and what are the ways to make it relevant. So when these articles come, try to make notes out of these. All right, so such as BRICS, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. Other highlights the active involvement of Global South countries in global decision-making progress. This demonstrates the increased influence of the developing world in shaping international policies and strategies, especially the economic strategies. We are talking about the WTO strategies. So please remember about that. Recently, during COVID, let's say WTO had to make decisions about the patents, vaccine patents. All right, this is an example because of the use in African countries, use in the Indian subcontinent. So these are some important examples. Even now, there is a debate about the fishing and the paddy and sugar cane, the ethanol production and all. So please keep reading about them. One thing is evidence of the Global South increasing influence. So establishment of loss and damage fund. This was in COP17. All right, in the Egypt. Second thing is Global South in COP28. Now, so we are dealing with the environment here. So loss and damage fund acknowledges that there was a damage done by the northern countries during the development ages to the southern countries and the whole world. So they should pay for it. All right. So there is an accountability here. Anticipated leadership from Global South countries in driving discussions on mitigating climate change at the upcoming UNFCCC 28 in the UAE. All right. Although it is sponsored by various oil countries and oil companies also. And the Coca-Cola is biggest sponsor, the world's biggest plastic polluter. G7 inclusivity. So Japan as the G7 summit host made efforts to involve developing countries like India, Brazil, Vietnam, Indonesia, Comoros and Cook Island in the discussion. This outreach to the Global South reflects a desire for more inclusive dialogues among the world's wealthiest nations. One of them is Japan. BRICS summit. Japan's case study is very important. You should read about Japan's economic reforms and how Japan become one of the world's leader countries now. BRICS summit expansion. The BRICS summit expanded its membership from 5 to 11 members, making a deliberate effort to engage and incorporate more Global South countries. So which countries are these? Please see and update. This highlights the growing importance of the Global South in BRICS grouping. One more thing we see is the G77 coming back to this. All right. So, summit in Havana, Cuba brought together a substantial number of developing countries to discuss key global issues. So, we see Japan here. We see India here. We see the Cuba here. All right. So, we are taking together all the countries. Some African counterparts are missing, but they are soon to be included, let's say. The Middle East we have already covered, Egypt and UAE for the COP summit. So African Union's inclusion into the G2. So this here comes Africa. So inclusion of 55 nation African Union into G2 signifies the growing recognition of African nations in global affairs. So the more poorer you are, let's say, the later you will be incorporated, but eventually you will be developed. So it's on their own. The countries, it's on their own to emerge as leaders. We can also do a case study of India and tell that why India was able to become a leader of the global south and emerge as a leader of the global south. So this can be a question. Conclusion is that global south influence evolving in a changing world. Demanding for equitable representation and meaningful voice is there. Rebalancing of power dynamics is needed in international politics, and global south increasing role in shaping the future of cooperation. One more thing that we need to see here is basically summing up the lecture now. We talked about the global south, but we'll keep India, let's say. Please adjust with the map. Alright, let's keeping India in the center point. We need to see that what are our leverages. Leverages means basically what are our powers. Both economic and economy is of course related to every other thing such as cultural relations, our geography. So these are subheadings right now, but in the main part, just a second. All right. So in the main sort of events, we need to see economic and political power in the IR. So you always need to keep seeing not only the neighbors, such as recently India has told that it will stop the flow of water towards Pakistan under IWC. You can remember that India stopped trade with Pakistan for many, many years. There was an outcry in the Nepal when India blocked its borders. All right, there's an active conflict going on with China here. So where is India losing and where is India gaining? Recently, India-Canada ties were sorted off. We have expelled one diplomat from there. All right, what are the relation of India with USA and other neighboring countries in the, let's say, weaponry? What are India's issues at, let's say, big economic organizations such as WTO, ICJ? All right. So these are the things that you need to make a mind map of as well as notes of. Your notes can be very short, all right, only giving away the mind map. But sometimes also try to write the answers just like the lecture we discussed, sorry. All right, so this was a lecture for today. We'll be coming back with more lectures. This is Yatharth here signing off. Thanks a lot. Have a good day. See you.